I didn't want to make this video. Actually, I had decided to make no videos about music software at all anymore. So why is that? Well, on one end of the spectrum, there are these hunts for being the first to deliver rather shallow overview or first few videos about new software or new versions. And if you don't have special connections to the manufacturer, you always lose the race and your videos don't get the number of visits, the number of views to make it an economically interesting endeavor. On the other end of the spectrum, you can produce proper in-depth videos, tutorials teaching all the details to enable the audience to work with the software in a professional way. But the number of views and the view time on one hand, and the number of working hours, rather working weeks sometimes, you need to produce such a video on the other hand, well, they don't make it a profitable enterprise either. And this here is my job. It's not a hobby. I have to make ends meet. So I will invest less time in making these videos and more time in doing sound design, writing my books about music and music production and sound design, and deliver the soundtrack to a video project here and there, all of which are economically more reasonable activities indeed. That's what I had planned before I came upon MGranular MB. In the course of preparing the second volume of my book about granular sound processing, I took a short look at this piece of software, a short look which became a long and intensive investigation before it ended up having grown into a love affair. MGranular MB is deep, very deep. There's hiding a universe of functionality hiding behind the rather harmless-looking start screen. The graphical demonstration which I have made of only the main functional blocks of the software may give you a notion of what is waiting for you under the hood. As puzzling as this graphic may look like, the basic structure of MGranular MB is explained in only a few sentences. First, the software does its work in real time. We cannot load sound files into it. Well, after all, it's an effect plugin. Second, the sound streaming through the software can be divided in up to 6 individually adjustable even, frequency bands. And third, each of these frequency bands can be parallel processed in up to 4 different channels called voices at the same time, and each of these voices can have up to 20 identical copies which are played at the same time. It should be clear, but let me say it explicitly, all adjustments that are made on the level of the frequency bands apply equally to all 4 voice channels. Sounds easy, but I want to be sure you've got it right, and so what is the biggest possible, the largest possible number of independent and different voices which MGranular MB can throw in at the same time? Yes, 24. 6 frequency bands, each of which employing 4 voices makes 24. And if you take into account that each of these 24 different voices can come along with 20 copies, you can get 480 voices sounding at the same time, literally an army of sound indeed. Please stop the video here and get yourself some coffee, because after only scratching the surface, I'm going to make the first dive into details now. I've loaded, let me take my headphones, I've loaded a Pioneer loop into my DAW, not into MGranular MB, which is not possible. Let's listen to this. It's just going from the bass up to the highest heights the piano has on offer. And I've only one single frequency band covering the whole spectrum here, which I want to change now. And I do so by right-clicking into this window this band configuration menu appears. The details, all the details about this, I'm going to talk about in one of the other of the next videos. For now, I want for frequency bands, I want to divide the single one into 4 individual ones, and I get a warning here, a warning telling me that in case I say okay, yes, continue this action, all parameters which I have tweaked before will be set to default. As I haven't tweaked any parameters so far, I say yes. Let me demonstrate what they mean. I change now the grain length. You see now we have 4 bands, and I can left click into each one to tweak the parameters of this individual band. Let me say the grain size and the pitch and delay and the copies. It's just randomly. And now I choose 5 bands, say yes, and bingo, every slider, every knob goes back to default positions. There is another way to insert more bands, which doesn't reset the parameters to default positions. I only choose the grain size 0, okay, and the pitch, and I click here in the whole window. I don't have to click into the active band, and I say I insert now. I can insert another frequency band to the right here or to the left. Let me say to the right, okay, and I go to my previous one, and you see the parameters are still as I had adjusted them, but I go back to more or less default. Pitches also to 0. When I click into the color window here, into the number window here, I get this panel to dial in a certain value. All right, so let me explain at first some things about the frequency bands. Let me start the loop. I can mute a band, and let's say this one, or I can solo a band, then it's we hear only this one. I can bypass these buttons are not that easily to be seen. I can bypass the processing of this band, not the band itself. So now I have bypassed the processing of this frequency band reaching from 100 Hertz to 500 Hertz, meaning that all adjustments I make here, well, or none of the adjustments I make here is processed on this frequency band. The frequencies, that what's coming from the piano in this band is still present, is still being led through to the output, but it's not processed as long as it is the bypass button is active here. I can change the gain by grabbing this horizontal line and putting it up. Now these frequencies are emphasized, or the other way around. And I can change the stereo position by grabbing this little pin here in the middle, down in the middle, and putting it to the left and to the right, so to change the stereo position of the frequencies in this band. And I can change, of course, but I can change the bandwidth by grabbing the vertical lines here and pushing them where I want to. Let me adjust now some certain bandwidths. I need a frequency band from 150 Hertz here to 300 or 330 better, which is about here. Yeah, it's okay. And I need a frequency band from here to 1000 to 1 kilohertz. And I need a frequency band from here, from 1000 kilohertz to 3500 kilohertz, about here, this one. Although that's okay. And these 2 frequency bands are as I like. I increase the gain of the high bands, and a little bit of the bass. So, and I I go to frequency band number 2 here, which is from 150, about 150 to about 330. And in voice 1, I increase the pitch to +6, but reduce the output, let's say, to 20, to 30, 28, 27, 30, minus 30, about that. And in voice number 2, everything what I have done so far here on the voice panel concerns only this frequency band. The other frequency bands are unchanged. And in voice number 2, I've tweaked it up to +24, so 2 octaves, and want this voice to have, you hear it, 5 copies. And now, I have another idea. I don't change the pitch to 20, to +24. The fixed pitch I leave at the original one, but I increase the pitch randomness, and I increase it by, or up to 17, +17. Yeah, that's okay. In voice number 2. Now I go to the band number 3, 1, 2, 3, and it's the band from 330 something to 1 kilohertz. And you see here we have default values for both voices. To switch on, to switch the voice on and off is just pushing this button here. And this voice number, the number 1 in band number 3, I want to crank up to +2 octaves and also 5 copies. Yeah, 6 copies is okay. And I switch on voice number 2, but I only switch it on, which emphasizes the voice, or which emphasizes the original state of the art, the original frequencies, the unprocessed frequencies of this frequency band, only the existing of an activated voice with default values. And the frequency band from 1000 to 3500, I just increase the number of copies in voice 1, which makes it, in the end, it makes it simply louder. Let me show the freeze and unfreeze functionality right now. Important to understand and to keep in mind is that freezing and unfreezing concerns only individual voices of individual bands. So right now I'm here at the band 1000 to 3,500 and voice number 1, and I can freeze it. Let me say now. Doesn't do such a lot, only a little bit in the background here. This is freezed. Voice number 2 is not activated, so we don't need it. I go back to the frequency band below. Voice number 2, I freeze it. Voice number 1, I freeze it. And now I go to frequency band from 150 to 300, about 330 Hertz, and again I have to freeze all individual voices if I want to. So what we now hear, the unfreezed voices are playing the rest of the pioneer loop. Let me unfreeze everything now. Next band, unfreeze, unfreeze, next band, unfreeze. And now we are at the original. I want to solo the band from 330 to 1 kilohertz. So I do so. Now I solo this band. Voice number 1, only one voice. Voice number 2, I deactivate voice number 2. I set the maximum copy of delay to, let's say, 150. The maximum delay of between these copies. I increase the number of copies and set the main delay at 150 and 60 as well. Let's wait until, yeah. All right. So, the details about the voice parameters, as well as a little bit more about the band parameters, dry, wet, and crossfade, especially crossfade, grain size is self-explanatory and random. The details about these things I'm going to explain in the later video, exactly in the next video. In this first part of our journey into MGranular MB, I have talked about and demonstrated a bit about the relationship of frequency bands and voices, how they work together, but not that much about details, and especially nearly anything about grains. This will change in the next part, in the next stage of our journey, when we dive a little bit, at least a little bit, deeper into the functionality. When this video is going to come and whether it's going to come at all, it's completely on you. It's your choice. It's your choice. You can support by, of course, the regular common things like liking and subscribing and sharing this video. And perhaps even more important, by visiting my website, following the links below in the description, and depending on your reaction, depending on the response I get, well, I make the next video sooner or later, or not at all. See you, enjoy your day, have a good time, Rolf.